No. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Adventures Pack. I'm Scott.
I'm James.
And I'm Emme.
And today, we're pretty excited because earlier this week, one of the newest books for D&D came out, and it is something that I've been a fan of for a very long time, so I don't know about you guys, very much been looking forward to this. We have Eberron, let me make sure I get this, Rising from the Last War.
It's steampunk pulp noir fantasy! Yes!
Now, history behind Eberron. When Wizards of the Coast, WotC, for those of you in the know, first acquired the rights to Dungeons & Dragons, they also acquired all of the previous settings, campaigns, characters, you name it. But obviously they wanted something of their own to be able to put out there. And so what they did was they held a competition, essentially. And this was around 3rd edition 3.5. And the winner of that competition was one Keith Baker, designer of this. However, that's about as far as my knowledge goes on this setting. It's one of the ones that I'm really unfamiliar with, frankly, as awesome as I think it looks. So I'm kind of relying on you guys to fill me in a little bit here.
Well, I will say I have been looking into Eberron for quite some time now. In all of the worlds that I've created for past games, my original Fractured World, Melos Machina, they've all had sort of this merger of magic and technology existing within the world. And that's pretty much what happens here. I believe Keith Baker first, when he pitched this in, I think it was 2002, the pitch for this was it is Lord of the Rings meets Indiana Jones meets the Maltese Falcon. So we get this awesome pulp fiction adventure just in this fantasy setting.
Nice.
What more could you ask for?
Yeah.
So on that note, the how magic exists in this world, it is still a high fantasy, high magic world, and fairly everyone in the world knows some magic, isn't that right?
Yeah, that's sort of the impression I was getting, at least from my quick reading of the book. And that was something that I think that's really interesting about this. Going through the other campaign settings that you see in 5, you have some higher magic settings. I mean, we can obviously talk about Ravnica and how much magic is a part of the world and how it's suffused in the nature of the guilds. But here in Eberron, it's a part of everything that you do and everything that you interface with. It's as much a part of our lives as a cell phone is. If you're a cook, you probably know a cantrip. And so it's a part of the industry of the world, and industry is everything. So it is very high magic, and the incidence of magic in your life is very high. Being highly talented or highly trained in it is still very rare and still very special.
So is it that everybody's born with like a little bit of aptitude for it and you have to kind of access that talent, or is it that you might cultivate a particular set of skills depending on what you do for a living?
It seems more like that. So
Right,
most of these cantrips seem to be wizard cantrips. It's more something that you would just receive training in your day-to-day life.
I see.
And now talking about the industry of the world, this world, as I said, has a bunch of technology in it, and it revolves around magic. You have this electric rail, which is essentially a magic-powered train that takes you from city to city. There are airships in this world, which I am a huge fan of. Yes, I was a steampunk nerd, so what? But also, you have a whole race that is built out of magic and technology, which... With that, let's go ahead and dive into... There's a lot of new things in this book, but we want to touch on the big things. And in this, there are new races, yeah? So the very first one that we have is the Changeling. Now, if any of you are familiar with doppelgangers, it's kind of the same thing. Changelings are able to if they've seen someone, they can, as an action, become that person, don their face and their voice. They are masters of disguise. So they're really cool. Next up, we've got the, how is it pronounced? Kalashtar?
I'm going with Kalashtar. I'm sure there's probably a pronunciation up on D&D Beyond. I haven't checked it. I'm going with Kalashtar because in my heart that's how it's pronounced.
That seems right.
Yeah, that's how it's spelled.
I'll say Kalashtar just so we can say, hey, look, we did both. So bases covered.
Sure.
But
Appease the internet.
yes.
So what's their deal? Because, I mean, I've never even heard the word.
Oh, yeah. They're super cool. They're kind of like a combined race. So either you or someone, it could have been very deep in your ancestry, combined with a spirit of light. And sometimes, especially when you dream, you gather the memories of this spirit, and they kind of play through you, and you're a part of the spirit world as much as this one.
Cool.
They're super cool.
Yeah, so they're a lot like the Trill from Star Trek.
My favorite, the Trill, which is why I love the Kashtar, because they remind me so much of the Trill, and the Trill are my favorite. Fight me. Well, don't fight me on my favorite. My favorite's an opinion. Anyway.
Next up, we have then the Shifters. Shifters they're kind of like a long-lost relative of lycanthropes, in that all shifters have an animal side to them, whether it be something more like a boar or a bear, or something a little more canine, or something a little more feline, or something that's really good at tracking. Shifters can, I believe it has an action, maybe a bonus action, don more animalistic features. They don't become an animal fully, but their teeth grow, and their skin tightens, and they grow hair, and they gain these new abilities based on what animals they have in their past.
So this isn't the same as like a druid's wild shape.
No. So you could have a druid shifter, which, I don't know, could be interesting. But it's more, you don't have access to everything. This is something in your bloodline that you can choose to have come out.
I see.
And there's 3 different kinds, and they all have different abilities.
I think there's 4, actually.
Oh, there are 4? Oh,
yeah.
My goodness. Oh, you're right, there are. They kind of look more like old school Wolfman, where like you just get the mutton chops and the teeth.
Mm-hmm. And the last of our new races is the one that is of technology and magic, the Warforge.
Best name.
These have been around for, again, most everything in here has been around since 3.5, but the Warforge themselves were built of mages. Mages of the old war created these things to be warriors in the war, in the last war. And you can have your tougher Warforge, your more stealthy Warforge, your more tech-savvy Warforge, but you are built of stone and metal and wood, and your spirit was brought about by magic. It is so cool.
One of my favorite things about the Warforged is, and they talk about this a little bit in the book, is the debate over your sentience and your independence and your livelihood. And that it has been widely decided that these people are a race. They have independent minds and independent souls. Healing magic works on them. They are, for all purposes, alive, but they are a very new race. They're very young. At the oldest, at this time, in this moment in the campaign setting, if you choose to run it right now as the campaign is run at this time, the oldest are usually about 30. So,
wow,
yeah,
that's really young.
They're very, very young in this world. So you haven't been around for long. Your interaction with the world is very, very new.
I'd see. I love this though, because in any kind of franchise that deals with questions of sentience and is something alive, that asks these kinds of philosophical questions, whether it's droids in Star Wars or Warforged in this, give me that kind of Isaac Asimov kind of feeling, like, what is it to live? What is it to identify as, I think, therefore I am. Mm-hmm. That is entirely my jam. I love it.
I'm so excited.
And just one last thing I want to leave you guys with. Imagine a rogue Warforged that with their thieves' tools, they just kind of, their fingers become lockpicks.
Love it.
A straight up option that is in this book. It is the best. But not the biggest thing to come out with Eberron. For the first time in 5 years, there is a new official base class, and that is the class of the Artificer. And the Artificer really is, they take technology and magic in this world and marry them together, and you get to play with that. You are basically a magical tinkerer. You do have access to spell slots, though not many. I believe you can only get up to 5th level. So they're very similar to a warlock in that sense. But the big thing that they do is they affect items. So you can touch an item and give it essentially an infusion. And so you could touch a pair of boots, and I believe you can turn them into boots of returning, where if you move this distance, you can teleport back. After.
Oh wow!
Yeah, and you just by touching it, you can only have X number of infusions up at any given time, but that obviously increases as you level up, and that's just their base kit. That's not even then choosing what path of the Artificer you go into. We get 3 really cool paths. The first one is the Alchemist.
Mm-hmm.
And the Alchemist is all about potions and making like salves that people can drink. You can make a random potion at any given time. And you know what it is when you make it. So you're not just making a concoction going, here, try this, let's see what happens.
I mean, you could.
You could.
Yay for my chaotic neutrals.
But eventually they also just get better with health potions. Any potions that heal eventually get just stronger. So they're a great class in that sense. Then there's the Artillerist. And the Artillerist is basically, they make weapons. They make wands that deal extra damage. They make little turrets that you can make a turret that is small enough that it can fit in your hand. Basically, you decide, I've made myself a flamethrower. Or
cannon.
If you don't want to hold on to the flamethrower, you can give it legs and it will walk around and you can command it like a little pet. And be like, hey, go over there, climb that wall, then breathe fire.
Frankly, I was sold just on the name, but now walking flamethrower.
And it gets better. As you level up, these turrets that you make can then give you and your allies armor. They can give you cover to hide behind. There are so many options with even just the Artillerist. It looks like it's going to be a blast. And then we get to the last of the paths that you can take, and that is the path of the Battlesmith. So the Battlesmith is essentially, I like to look at them as a field medic. So they get to go out, you can choose to have a little mechanical companion, whether it be like a small dog, a small horse. They specify in the book that you get to choose how many legs it has. So
all the legs.
Like 8 legs, yeah.
All more legs. Just
mechanical octopus.
Spider dog.
Oh, I'm still there. Spider dog.
But so this little companion can go out and help your allies while you stick around, maybe off some other side of the field doing something. I believe you can cast healing spells through your companion, but additionally, your companion can take attacks instead of your enemies. It can distract, or take attacks instead of your allies. It can distract your enemies, and also attack on its own. It gets to act on your initiative.
Sounds really useful.
Yeah, you are essentially a magic machine ranger, which is great. There's a lot of options going into the Artificer. They have done an incredible job over at WotC at putting this together. I know there were a lot of tweaks going into it.
It's been a while.
Yeah, they've been teasing the Artificer for an ever-loving eternity on the Unearthed Arcana. I know it was incredibly broad when they first put it out on the internet. The Artificer could practically do anything the Artificer wanted, and they've really narrowed it down, which is, of course, the point of having them playtest it for them. But
yeah, it's really, when it first came out, I was kind of, that might be a little broken, but I think that they've done an incredible job bringing it to something that is not just playable, but is diverse and is going to be a lot of fun for both players and dungeon masters.
Just from an aesthetic point of view as well, I love, and again, this is with a relatively limited knowledge, just myself, of what this campaign setting is and what the feel of it is. But the Artificer, for me, really seems to embody that feeling of magic and science being, one in this setting. So I think, great new class and probably perfect campaign setting to release them with.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. It's absolutely designed for this world. I do know at the end of that, though, they actually have a very lovely paragraph that can really help you integrate the Artificer into other campaign settings as well. And they have suggestions for where you might meet one. So it is for Eberron, but it's something that you can take and put in other places, which I always think is great fun.
Even better, yeah.
Now, there are a lot of new things in this book. We're trying to touch on the most prevalent, and the last one that I think we really want to talk about is this idea of dragon marks.
Dragon marks!
Yeah, so
they are super cool. So, how it works, Cliff Notesing it a little bit, there's this draconic prophecy that goes through the world. The world was created by these primordial dragons, the progenitor dragons, and their will seeps into the world, and there are draconic sigils and prophecies that will just appear throughout the world, and they seem to be more instructions and seem to point more towards that hint of kind of a multiverse, where they're not this will happen, but seem to be like, if X, Y, and Z happen, then A will happen as well. they definitely hint that there's no exact line for time, which is very fun. But one of the weird quirks of that is the dragon marks. So through individual bloodlines, there are 12 of them. At adolescence, you might manifest a dragon mark, and over time, there have grown these dragon mark houses, which are these captains of industry. They aren't allowed to own land, but they're still somehow very powerful and have these holdings, and there's a lot of political turmoil between them and the ruling class and things like that about exactly where they fit in. But the long and the short of it is that the dragon mark replaces a sub-race within your racial abilities, essentially. It varies differently depending on what race you are, and depending on what race you are allows you access to different dragon marks, but they all allow you different abilities. So usually, like there's the House of Shadows and the House of Finding that allow you to navigate the world and sell your services a little bit differently because you are naturally gifted with this ability to do something else. And you get this really cool glowing, it's bigger and crazier than a tattoo, and it implies that you should do something kind of crazy with it. Like every time you're near somebody with the same one, it glows. Or sometimes after I use it, it burns. And there's even instructions in there for an aberrant one, which hurts you or somebody around you because your lines got twisted the wrong way. There's a bunch of rules about how dragon marks work, and it's very specific and really leads into the intrigue of the world. I'd say intrigue is like the big word for this book.
Absolutely.
So speaking of like the captains of industry and like the the political power structure here, this isn't the same dragon marks that wrote the Draconic Manifesto.
I honestly did not know
that. Sorry, terrible political humor.
Oh my god! Oh, are you making?
So there's a lot.
Jokes.
There's a lot of new options for players, for dungeon masters. There's a whole new world that is filled with adventure, filled with cool technology magic. We've just touched on a few of the things that this book brings. There's also new feats. There's a plethora of new magical items, and there's a whole bunch of storylines in here as well. It is literally a whole world for you to explore. I highly recommend picking up a copy or looking into it. If you have a dungeon master that you think might be interested, maybe say, hey, we should try this sometime.
Hint.
So, thank you all so much for joining us here at the Adventurers Pack. Once again, I'm Scott.
I'm James.
I'm Emme.
And we will see you next time.